A very good afternoon to all pious yogis. This afternoon, I shall give a brief instruction since all of you have many experiences in the practice of mindfulness meditation, Vipassana meditation. But first, I shall explain a sutta or discourse from Radha Samyutta. The title of this discourse is a being. A being here means satta or in Pali. So once Venerable Radha asked the Buddha, in what way is one called a being? The Buddha answered, one is stuck, tightly stuck in desire or lust, delight, and craving for form. Therefore, one is called a being. Similarly, when one is stuck, tightly stuck in desire, lust, delight, and craving for feeling, craving for perception, craving for volition formations, craving for consciousness, therefore one is called a being. So it's because of this craving, that's why one is called satta. So this Pali word satta has the meaning of attached. It's because of attachment, it's because of craving, then one becomes a being. So the Buddha then explained with a simile. He said, just like some little boys or girls are playing with sand castles. So have you been playing sand castle when you were small? So the Buddha said, so long these little boys or girls are not devoid of lust or desire, affection, thirst, and passion, and craving for those sense castles, then they cherish them, pray with them, treasure them, and treat them possessively. So just like any little boy or girl, if they love the toys very much, then they would become very possessive, or sometimes not willing to share with others, and so on. So similarly, if a worldlings is craving, has strong attachment to this form. As you know, form is one of 5 aggregates, or the other aggregates, then they will become very possessive. So when a little boy or little girl is no longer interested in that toys, then he or she would throw away the toys or even destroy the toys. So the Buddha said, but when those little boys or girls lose their lust, desire, affection, or thirst, passion, craving for those sand castles, then they scatter them with their hands and feet, or demolish them, shatter them, and put them out of play. So the Buddha said further, so too, Radha or scattered form, demolish it, shatter it, or put it out of play, practice for the destruction of craving. So the Buddha also gave the same teaching in relation to the other 4 aggregates. Scattered the feeling, or scattered the perception, or scattered the volitional formation, or scattered consciousness, demolish them, shatter them, put them out of play, practice for the destruction of craving. So for the destruction of craving is nibbana. So you should rightly understand that we practice mindfulness meditation, Vipassana meditation, is to attain destruction of craving. If this craving is not destructed, then one will become a being again and again in this samsara. So in order to attain destruction of craving, we have to develop true knowledge. True knowledge here means vidya. The opposite of vidya is avidya, ignorance. So what is the meaning of ignorance here? Once the Buddha said, it's because the uninstructed ruling does not understand form subject to arising as it really is. He also does not understand form subject to vanishing as it really is. So similarly, he doesn't understand form subject to arising and vanishing as it really is. So he also doesn't understand the feeling or perception, volition, formation, consciousness subject to arising as it really is. He also doesn't understand feeling or perception, volition, formation, consciousness. All these are subject to vanishing as they really are. In other words, he doesn't understand all these aggregates are subject to arising and passing away. So the Buddha say, this is called ignorance, avidya. But the one who is endowed with true knowledge will understand forms subject to arising as it really is. So he also understands form subject to vanishing as it really is. So he also understands form subject to arising and passing away as it really is. Similarly, one who is endowed with true knowledge, vidya, also understand the other four aggregates, feeling, perception, original formation, consciousness, subject to arising as they really are. So these four aggregates also subject to vanishing as they really are. So all these aggregates are subject to arising and passing away. So only the noble disciple who is endowed with this true knowledge. So if one aspire to become a noble one, then one has to develop vidya or true knowledge. So that's why one has to be mindful of their own five aggregates, or in other words, nama rupa, mental phenomena, and physical phenomena, or as they really are. As you know, true knowledge, vidya, here also can be said synonymous with panya or wisdom. So when one aspire to develop vidya or panya, one has to mindful of their own five aggregates. It's because panya has to be developed through personal experience or direct experience. So meditators always pay attention to their own mind or states of mind, their physical movements of body phenomena. So mindful means paying full attention to a phenomenon that's arising at that moment as it really occurs. At the beginning of retreats, it's difficult to pay full attention to one phenomenon because concentration is not yet developed. So meditators need to be patient and increasing the mental effort gradually. So that's why we lay down a principle or guideline in this practice of mindfulness. The guideline or the principles of mindfulness meditation is to be mindful of the predominant object or the most distinct object that's arising at that moment, and note it as it duly occurs. So when the concentration is not yet fully developed, meditators could become conscious of a 2 or 3 or even 4 objects or phenomena that are arising at that moment. So that's why meditators have to keep the mindfulness with the strongest object or the strongest phenomenon. So this guideline is applied to bodily objects or physical phenomena as well as body sensation. For example, when meditators are mindful of rising movements, then if there's other body object arising and it's not more distinct than the rising movements, then meditators have to keep the mindfulness with the process of rising movements. If meditators did not put effort to keep the mindfulness with the strongest object, for example, the process of rising movements, then the mind will be wandering to other less distinct objects very soon. Similarly, if meditators did not put effort to keep the mindfulness with the body objects, then the mind could be wandering away to external objects. But whenever there are two different phenomena arising, one is arising in the body, another is arising in the mind, then mindfulness meditators should give priority to the mental phenomenon or the mental object. It's because meditation is mental training or mental culture. That's why it's important to be mindful of whatever mental state or mental object that's arising at that moment. So when meditators are mindful of any mental state or mental object, they have to put effort to be mindful of that mental object and know it until that mental object had passed away. Then they're mindful of the next object. For example, the process of rising movements, if that process is the strongest body object. So at the beginning of the retreat, and when the mind is not yet calm and peaceful, there could be many thinking, wandering mind arising now and then. So meditators have to be patient with all these mental states, for example, thinking, wandering into the past, or even sometimes doing some contemplation on the Dharma and so on. Sometimes the mind is analyzing the experience. Meditators should be mindful of that analytical mind as soon as possible. So meditators have to be careful with the thinking mind, wandering mind, analyzing, applying preconceptions or preconceived ideas into the practice. So it's important to stay at this present moment. So the meditators could mindful and note what the object is arising at that very moment. Then we always emphasize that effort or virya is the foundation of the success. But meditators needs to increase the mental effort gradually so that the effort doesn't cause too much of tension or pressure to the mind or tiring the mind. So mindful of every object as it duly occurs is a key points or keywords in this practice. In other words, how does an object appear? Then meditators just take it as it is. Be mindful and know it as it duly occurs. So if you understand this guideline or principle practice, then it's not difficult to understand the technique of mindfulness meditation. So the technique is just to be mindful and note what the object is arising at that present moment. But at the beginning of practice, the mindfulness is not as strong and concentration is not deep enough. The meditators might have to direct the mind. The mind here means the mindfulness or the awareness to the object. So at the beginning of sitting meditation, you might have to direct your attention to the movement of abdomen, taking it as a basic object of sitting meditation. But if your mindfulness is quite strong, then if the movement of abdomen is clear right at the beginning of sitting meditation, then the mindfulness will appear with the movements immediately. So in that way, meditators did not have to direct the mindfulness to the movement of abdomen because mindfulness or awareness has appeared there by itself. Similarly, if meditators take the touching of the air or the wind with the nostrils as the object of mindfulness meditation, if the mindfulness is able to perceive that touching clearly, the meditators should follow the mindfulness and note it as it is. Similarly, right at the beginning of sitting meditation, if mindfulness or the attention perceive there's a clear sensation of warm or hot, then you just merely follow your mind and know it as it is. So sometimes meditators need not have to direct the mind to the object because the mindfulness or the mind has gone to the clearest object by itself. But if the mindfulness is weak, that's why meditators need to begin the sitting meditation, for example, by being mindful of the movements of the abdomen, know it as rising, falling, or by mindful of sitting postures and 2 points of touching as the beginning objects of meditations. So these three objects, movement abdomens or sitting postures, 2 touching points, help the meditators to begin the sitting meditation. They are objects of mindfulness meditation, insight meditation, or in other words, they also have 3 characteristics in common with others. There's anicca, dukkha, anatta. They also endow with their own characteristics. Or in other words, individual characteristics or sabhava lakkhana. So these three objects are not the objects of concentration. So sometimes some meditators mistaken these three objects as the objects of samatha. So whenever the mind is restless, then they come back to this object and try to build up the concentration again. So meditators begin the sitting meditation with one of these objects, in other words, either the movement abdomens or sitting postures, which is alternate with two chosen touching points. But if at the beginning of sitting meditation, there's other stronger object arising, for example, perceive warm clearly, or there's a thinking arising, the meditator should be mindful of this object and know it as it is. So in that way, meditators develop mindfulness from one object to next object, from one movement to next movement. So meditators should put effort to cultivate the mindfulness or to strengthen the power of mindfulness. We do not put effort to make an object clearer or to become more distinct. Meditators are supposed to mindful and note every object as it really occurs. Sometimes an object doesn't appear clearly. For example, the movement abdomen doesn't appear clearly. Then some meditators put some force into it to make the movements appear clearer. So what should be done is to strengthen the mindfulness, the power of mindfulness. So when the power of mindfulness is getting stronger and stronger, then meditators shall be able to mindful of every object as it is. So when the mindfulness is fully developed and with a deep concentration, the mindfulness will be able to perceive one object or one phenomenon at each moment. So this is a concentration of in other words, Vipassana Samadhi. So at the times, meditators could not follow the guideline or the principle that's to mindful of the strongest object. At that time, meditators could not follow the guideline of practice. The guideline that's to mindful of the strongest object. So meditators could not follow the guideline anymore. At that time, meditators perceive an object, for example, pain, even though that painful sensation is not stronger than the previous pain or previous session of sitting, yet the mind only perceives that pain at that moment. So, for example, when the mindfulness perceives that painful sensation, although that painful sensation is not stronger than before, or it's not stronger than the previous session of the sitting, but because the mindfulness is well developed with deep concentration, the mindfulness only perceives that pain only. There's nothing else. These meditators try to search for another stronger object, or thinking this pain is not stronger or clearer than before, then that mindfulness will be disturbed or distracted by his own thinking. So sometimes meditators could develop constant and continuous mindfulness for a period of time. They may be able to realize that the mindfulness perceive one object after another so quickly or so rapidly. So if meditators uh, did not have to did not know how to sustain the effort, then that rapid process mindfulness will be subsiding very soon. So if meditators have rightly understood the guideline or the practice, then they know what should be mindful during sitting meditation. If there's no strong or very distinct body object arising, then meditators should be mindful of the basic objects of the sitting meditation. Whenever meditators are mindful of any body object or sensation, if there's a mental state or mental object arising, then meditators should mindful and note that mental object as soon as possible. It's important to mindful and note the mental object until they have disappeared, or then be mindful of the next object again. For example, movement of the movements. If the movement of the movements is the strongest body object. When the mindfulness is not strong enough, meditators may not able to perceive the passing away or the disappearance of the thinking or any mental state precisely. For example, when the mindfulness is still weak, as meditators are mindful not thinking, sometimes that thinking has not disappeared. Suddenly, a clear sensation arising, for example, pain. Then the mind you go to the pain immediately. So in that case, when the mind has gone to the pain, most likely the thinking already disappeared. The meditators have to mindful and note pain. So at that time, it's not possible to go back to note the thinking. So in this case, meditators have to live at that present moment. Since the mindfulness had gone to the pain, then meditators just mindful and note the pain. But when the mindfulness is well developed and there's deep concentration, meditators shall be able to perceive the passing away of the mental state, for the thinking precisely, then there will be another object arising in the next moment. So at the beginning of retreats, on the first day, second day, meditators may choose to sit for 1 hour, if possible. So when meditators could sit better, they may increase the duration of sitting gradually, for example, by 10 or 15 minutes, and so on. As you know, every sitting meditation should be preceded by walking meditation. So whenever there's a time to practice walking meditation, meditators should walk for 1 hour. So meditators need to slow down the pace of walking gradually. On the first day, as well as the second day of retreats, meditators may choose to mindful of the walking meditation, left and right, about 15 minutes. Then be mindful of 3 phases of step: lifting, pushing, dropping, lifting, pushing, dropping. So when meditators could slow down gradually and the walking is getting stable, then they may increase the objects, for example, the lifting, pushing, dropping, touching, pressing, and so on. During walking meditation, meditators need to make mental noting or labeling whenever it's possible, wherever it's possible. So mental labeling means mentally take note of the object. For example, saying the name of the object lifting, pushing, dropping, and so on. So mentally saying lifting, pushing, dropping is not yet meditating. It's important to pay attention or perceiving every process of movements well. Then this is in fact meditating or mindfulness meditation. Sometimes meditators could not take note mentally. For example, the process of dropping movements. Sometimes meditators perceive the process of dropping movements quite fast. Meditators have not yet made mental noting dropping, already perceive the starting. The meditators just let it be. It is not possible to go back to the past. So in this case, we can say the past has gone, just let it be. It's more important to come back to that present moment. For example, sometimes the foot is dropped down suddenly, the heel of the foot at the back is already lifted out. The meditators should quickly mindful of that lifting movements. During walking meditation, whenever there's other body object arising or sensation arising, and if that object or sensation very distinct, more predominant than the movements of the foot, the meditators should mindful of that object or sensation. For example, a sensation, e.g. sensation arising and is very strong, the meditators have to stop walking, be mindful, and note that sensation as it is. If there's a desire to scratch it, be mindful, note desire, and so on. So meditators also need to put mental effort to keep the mindfulness staying with the various processor movements, the standing postures, while standing at the end of walking path, putting effort to mindful of the turning movement bodies, and so on. If the effort is weak, then the mind will wander away, for example, to the external object, such as sound or less distinct object. So at the beginning of the retreats, meditators also could not pay full attention to a process movements well. So meditators need to be patient and increasing the mental effort gradually. So meditators could take their own initiative to slow down the pace of walking gradually, day by day. In other words, meditators have to learn from their own experience in order to make progress. You can learn from your experience well, then you could make improvements on it and make more progress. At the walking meditation, it's important to carry forward your mindfulness and concentration into the sitting meditation. So as you know, in the changeover the postures, changeover postures, for example, from walking, changing to the sitting, or at the sitting meditation, you wish to practice walking again. So it's important to sustain the mindfulness in the changeover of the postures. So that's why at the walking meditation, if possible, meditators sustain the same steps. For example, at the walking meditation, meditators were mindful of lifting, pushing, dropping. Then they should sustain the same way of walking to the place of sitting. Then it's important to sit down slowly, mindfully, arranging your legs. If you wish to pay homage to Buddha, you should do it slowly, mindfully. Similarly, at the end of sitting meditation, meditators should sustain the mindfulness so that the mindfulness will be carried forward to the next activity or the next aspect of practice. Then, besides practicing walking and sitting meditation, as you know, you need to mindful of your daily routine activities, such as eating your breakfast, lunch, or walking outside, or for example, from one place to another place, and so on. So it's also helpful to the progress of practice. That's by slowing down the daily activities gradually. So slowing down the movements or the action is helpful to the practice or the development of mindfulness. So the most important, the slow pace of movements is conducive to the development of mindfulness. If meditators put a lot of effort to slow down, sometimes they could not mindful of the movements well. It's because when we want to slow down, we need to put some intentional effort in words purposely slowing down. So if that intentional effort is too strong, then it might distract the mindfulness. If meditators slow down the movements gradually, they do not feel any distraction from that slow movements at all. So meditators may practice general mindfulness at certain time or certain activities, and sometimes they need to practice more specific mindfulness in order to sharpen the mindfulness. If meditators practice general mindfulness in their daily activities all the time, then it may not help to sharpen the mindfulness. So it's quite helpful to the progress that meditators should practice specific mindfulness or mindfulness in more details for a period of time or doing certain activities. So meditators need to choose a suitable time, a suitable place to practice mindfulness in more details. For example, paying homage or drinking some water at certain time. So in other words, when meditators practice mindfulness in details at a suitable time, suitable place, there's a time and a place where meditators can slow down and doing one process movements after another. But at certain time, at certain places, meditators are not able to slow down and doing the process movements one after another. Then there's a time they should practice general mindfulness or general awareness. So when meditators are practicing mindfulness in more details, they also need to make mental noting or labeling whenever it's possible or where possible. But when meditators could not slow down much and practicing general mindfulness, then they do not have to make so much of noting. Sometimes they only make a few mental noting. We emphasize the importance of practicing of mindfulness daily activities. This because if meditators could practice mindfulness of daily activities very well, then the mindfulness will be strengthened because there's a continuity of mindfulness. So if meditators do not put much effort in the practice of mindfulness of daily activities, then the mindfulness will not become stronger and more powerful. So the practice of mindfulness is like the ancient time. In the ancient time, the people need to rub 2 sticks of wood in order to generate heat and to produce a fire. So similarly, meditators have to train themselves to develop mindfulness from one moment to next moment, the concentration from one moment to next moment, and the experience of meditation from one moment to next moment. Then, in that way, they will produce a stronger and stronger of this what called fire of wisdoms. So only these fire of wisdoms will have the power to burn away ignorance, craving, and other mental defilements. So meditators have to bear in mind that when meditators are mindful of not any object or phenomenon, they want to develop true knowledge or vidya or panya or wisdoms. Meditators are mindful of any object or phenomenon is to purify the mind from ignorance, craving, and other defilements. So the practice leads to the destruction of craving. This craving is arising also due to a cause. This craving is arising due to DT, the wrong view of a self. So as you know, this view of self, DT or sakaditi, can arise because of avidya or ignorance. So only by developing true knowledge, vidya or wisdom, panya, that we can uproot ignorance and other mental defilements. So meditators have to remind themselves now they have to live at this present moment in order to develop the true knowledge, vidya, or the wisdom, panya. They have to put aside other preconceptions, preconceived idea of the practice, have to put aside the book knowledge, the theory, and so on. So that the mind is free from all kinds of ideas. So what's to be bear in mind is just to develop mindfulness or to develop bare awareness, bare attention. So I wish all meditators put forth enough mental effort in the practice so that you can gain this true knowledge through your own effort and overcoming ignorance, craving, and other mental defilements, and attaining your spiritual aim soon.
สาธุ สาธุ สาธุ